And it's time for our Entre Nous segment. And today we're talking about the art of tipping the French way. For more on this, Solange Mougin joins me in the studio. So, Solange, is there really a French way to tip? I thought it would be no.
Well, it's yes and no, because it is such a highly personal practice, but it is also very much a cultural one. So how good or bad are the French when it comes to tipping? What are the laws around this? How does France compare to other countries? So many questions. But first, some linguistics. The word tip, as in a gratuity, is not an acronym of to ensure promptness. This is a false urban legend. The word tip actually dates back to the 1600s and was slang among some petty criminals. Quickly, by the 1700s, it began to be used for what at the time was called the vales in English, or small monetary rewards for servants. Now, in French, a tip is called a pourboire, which literally translates to for drinking. The first written traces of pourboire are from Molière in 1662. And interestingly, we see this common meaning, a bit of money to drink, in lots of languages, like the German Trinkgeld. The same goes with Swedish, Spanish, Hungarian, Polish, and Russian.
So those are the terms, Solange. What about the actual practice here in France?
Well, French law says that tipping is permitted in service professions, people who are in contact with the public. And people, when they tip, they generally tip waiters, hairdressers, delivery people, and other somewhat low-paying jobs. Unlike in some countries where tips help employees get to minimum wage, think the United States, here in France, tipping is on top of a salary. There are some exceptions to this, but as a rule, tipping is voluntary here. It's that little bit of extra tax-free money to say thank you, for example, for a coffee.
At least €1. We always have a little cash or change to give.
I don't think I have anything. I pay for everything with a card now.
I often have spare change. I give what I can, but usually not more than €1.
Now, there's been much debate recently about whether tips should stay tax-free, particularly ones that are given by credit card, which is becoming more common, and these are easier to trace. The French National Assembly voted in favor of this, or to prolong until 2028 this tax-free status, as long as the tips don't go over 1.6 times the minimum wage. This is part of the 2026 budget. But people are divided on this issue. Some say that tips should actually be taxed to help social services. Others say no, that they are a much-needed bonus in industries that often struggle to find workers.
Solange, exactly how generous or stingy are French people when it comes to tipping?
Well, again, it is very much a voluntary thing, so it all comes down to personal choice. But we do have some numbers for you. Lightspeed, which provides a digital tipping software, they found that the average bank card tip in France was €4.70, or a 12% increase since 2023. Their figures put France just behind Switzerland's €5 as the biggest card tippers in Europe. But it's more nuanced than this, of course. In Germany, for example, people gave smaller sums, but they tipped more people. But those figures are just, again, for credit card tips, a practice that is increasing here. Some workers say that cards bring better tips, but others, they don't like it.
Promising a hire that they'll get 3 times more with card tips makes them want to work here. With the card machine, after a while, the waiter wouldn't even look down at what was added. It's the gesture of putting something down. That's the acknowledgement of the client to the worker.
Now for another poll, this one by Sunday, a restaurant payment company. It found that the national average for a tip in France is 4.8% of the bill. But that percentage goes up to 7% in the Paris region and also in eastern France, while in the north, it's just 3.5%. As for how many French people say they actually tip, well, here the studies are all over the map. One by Lyft found that 8 out of 10 people say that they leave a tip. Another one from the UK's YouGov, this is from 2 years ago, they found that just 34% of French people say that they tip regularly at restaurants, all of which is a case in point that knowing what to do and when is quite tricky.
And finally, during the holiday season in France, there's actually a very particular kind of tipping.
Yeah, In France, there is something called les étrennes. These are Christmas and New Year's gifts, be it a trinket, a bottle of wine, an envelope of cash. Now, les étrennes date back to Roman times when sprigs of verbena plants were given to magistrates. This morphed into dates and honey and then coins. In modern-day France, these étrennes were traditionally given to concierges or building managers who would receive 10% of a tenant's rent as a tip. It was a way of saying thank you and is a way of saying thank you, but also please be good to me this coming year. It's a gesture that many people still do. Nowadays, there are fewer concierges, but the tradition indoors for cleaners, garbage collectors, post office workers, firefighters. It's not always 10% of a wage, though. However, the practice is outlawed in some places and for certain professions. There's no national law on this. But for example, in Paris, garbage collectors, they are not allowed to ask for these tips because people were and still do pretend to be city workers. So you have to be wary. And with these tips, les étrennes, there is something that is a mix of sincerity but also strategy, making them one of the more unique parts of tipping here in France. But at the end of the day, it's all about giving thanks and all about helping others, which is indeed a beautiful thing.
Thank you, Solange. And that's it for this edition of Entre Nous. You are watching France 24. Do stay tuned.